Israel's expanding invasion of Lebanon this Thursday night.
They're literally bombing everywhere.
The hundreds of fresh targets, the civilians caught in the crossfire, and the anxiety among Canada's Lebanese community.
We are constantly watching the news and we are just wondering what's next. Are they alive?
Correcting a horrible injustice. The Indigenous man declared innocent after being wrongfully convicted of murder 5 decades ago. Disturbing allegations what country music superstar Garth Brooks is being accused of. And no longer an unknown soldier.
He definitely had this oh my goodness moment.
How this 21-year-old Manitoban killed in the First World War has finally been identified.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Israel is expanding the scope of its invasion into Lebanon, warning people in the south to leave their homes until further notice. And late tonight, there were massive blasts in residential areas of Beirut, including near the city's airport, just as a commercial flight was landing. At the same time, Israel is fighting on another front tonight, striking a Palestinian refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry says 16 people were killed there. In Lebanon, Israeli attacks have displaced roughly 1 million people. That's about a fifth of the population. Israel says it struck about 200 targets overnight, including weapons production sites and Hezbollah command centers. One target was a high-rise in central Beirut. Today, the World Health Organization said among those killed in the last 24 hours are 28 healthcare workers.
Many health workers are not reporting to duty as they fled the areas where they work due to bombardments.
And today, the American president hinted Israel may be planning to attack Iran's oil industry. Jeff Semple is following developments from Jerusalem.
Beirut's smoldering skyline signaled another deadly escalation. Israel striking the heart of Lebanon, bombing this building in central Beirut, just meters from the Lebanese parliament and the United Nations office.
The entire building was shaking. All of Beirut heard the explosion.
This Lebanese Canadian was nearby and says the airstrike hit without any warning.
They're literally bombing everywhere. They're bombing everyone, whether they belong to a political party or not. So no one feels safe.
The airstrike hit the office of a Hezbollah-run health institution. At least 9 people were killed. Israel's new offensive, launched late last month, has already killed 1,400 Lebanese, more than the last war in 2006. The Israeli military says it's targeting Hezbollah, but like in Gaza, civilians are being increasingly caught in the crossfire. This 9-year-old suffered multiple fractures after the roof of her house came crashing down on top of her.
You know, it's hard to work in fear. I'm afraid about myself, about my safety.
He says half of their staff have left to escape the bombing. The Lebanese government says more than 1 million people have been forced to flee their homes. 250,000 have reportedly fled to war-torn Syria. A cruel irony after Lebanon accepted 1.5 million Syrian refugees a decade ago. I left my home city of Raqqa, Syria in 2016 because I did not want my family to live in a war zone, he says. Now we have to leave again. Israel's military has ordered the evacuation of at least 76 villages in southern Lebanon and is calling in thousands more troops as part of what it calls a limited ground operation.
Once you get into a new conflict, you cannot control all of the variables. We are literally on the brink of a regional conflict.
It has to be a diplomatic, political solution to it. But to move towards that, we need a ceasefire.
Israel has rebuffed calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon and is now facing pressure to show restraint against Iran. The U.S. president said he opposed striking Iran's nuclear program, but did not rule out other options.
Would you support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, sir?
We're in discussion with that. I think that would be a little, anyway.
It seems no longer a question of if, but when Israel will strike Iran. The Israeli government reportedly wants to wait until after Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year holiday, which ends on Friday evening. And another date that could delay things, Donna, Monday, October 7th, the anniversary of the Hamas attack.
Jeff Semple in Jerusalem. Jeff, thanks. Foreign nationals, including Canadians, have been urged to get out of Lebanon. The Beirut airport is still open and some commercial carriers are still operating, but a number of countries are making contingency plans should that change. Mercedes Stephenson is in Cyprus, an island about 180 kilometers off Lebanon's coast. Mercedes, what preparations are underway there?
Donna, Canadian troops are already here in Cyprus, and Global News has learned more are on the way from Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. Their mission? To help with logistics, including transporting and processing Canadians if the federal government orders an evacuation of Lebanon. Aia Napa Marina is one of the most eastern points on the island. Cypriot Marine Police have already been processing private vessels arriving from Beirut. Their passengers? Mostly diplomats and wealthy foreign nationals. In the port of Larnaca, a very different picture. Tents have been erected to process the potential mass exodus of thousands of foreign nationals, arriving in simultaneous military evacuations by as many as 10 countries, including France, Canada, Australia, and the UK. This small island nation isn't worried about being overwhelmed. They say they are in a state of maximum readiness to serve as a hub for those fleeing the violence before they return to their country of origin. And it did just that, Donna, in 2006, when it helped 60,000 foreign nationals fleeing the violence in Lebanon.
Mercedes Stephenson in Larnaca, Cyprus. Just over 24,000 Canadians have registered as being in Lebanon. As of yesterday, Global Affairs Canada says it's helped 344 Canadians, permanent residents and eligible family members get out of the country. Despite the danger, thousands are choosing to stay, at least for now. The government has booked seats on commercial flights out of Lebanon. But as Heather Yurex West reports, for some Lebanese Canadians and their families, leaving is not as simple as it may sound.
Tracking the news night and day, Noor Kanafani is sick with concern.
I have my parents, my father and mother, and one brother and one sister back home.
When their Beirut neighborhood was bombed on Monday, Kanafani's family was forced to flee the city.
They are now displaced. They are in the mountains hiding. And they are just like anticipating every day there are strikes and nobody knows what is the next step.
It's why the Alberta woman is desperate to get her family safely out of Lebanon fast. But none of her family members are Canadian citizens, and only her father has a visa that would enable him to come. Right now, for Lebanese Canadians or those with visas, the only way out of Lebanon is on a commercial flight. Hussein Asaf's mother-in-law arrived via Turkey in Montreal on Wednesday night.
She was living in the south, where the mountains are, far from anything. But then the bombs started coming to the mountains, and they started asking people to leave their houses because they're going to bomb them.
But while Susan Mokbel had a visa to travel to her daughter, she had to leave her sisters and other family behind.
It's very difficult for her. She has the opportunity to leave, but they don't.
Global Affairs says there are still seats on commercial flights available, though those able to get out have faced long lineups at the Beirut airport with staggeringly high fares. Montrealer Rachel Hamadi is trying to help her mother get out.
She's been trying to leave, but it's pretty hard. There aren't a lot of tickets available. Most flights got cancelled, and the flights you find are really expensive.
$4,000 or more per ticket as people in Lebanon scramble for safety and fear more violence to come. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
Police in Montreal are investigating whether 5 young people arrested for possessing incendiary devices could have been planning something in connection with the conflict in the Middle East. 3 minors and 2 people in their 20s were taken into custody after large amounts of gasoline and torches were found in their vehicles. Police investigators are trying to determine whether nearby synagogues were the intended targets. Police in Montreal have ramped up their presence at Jewish schools and synagogues ahead of the 1-year anniversary of October 7th. A child in Ontario has died from rabies, according to the medical officer of health in Brantford. Neither the child's age nor date of death has been released, but the child apparently contracted rabies in northern Ontario. A local Board of Health meeting was told the child woke up to find a bat in their bedroom. No signs of scratches or saliva were detected, so the parents did not seek a rabies vaccine. Rabies attacks the brain and the nervous system, and if untreated, an infection is usually fatal. The RCMP say 5 young people have now been arrested and released on strict conditions after a violent assault on a 13-year-old girl in Kelowna, BC. She was swarmed and beaten unconscious on Friday, and that vicious attack was caught on camera. Neetu Garcha reports in a warning some of the images in the story are disturbing.
Definitely hard to watch.
This Vancouver child psychiatrist and mother reacting to video of the disturbing and violent group attack on a teenage girl. The 13-year-old's father says she was lured by her best friend under the pretense of attending a party. To protect her, we aren't identifying him. He says when she got there, her friend left. His daughter was then surrounded.
As far as I know, that's when they took her phone, so she couldn't call for help anymore.
Video of the attack has been circulated widely on social media. We are airing portions of it with the father's consent.
Kicking her when she's down unconscious, throwing dirt on her when she's limp. I really don't, minors don't mean anything to me. I want everybody just held accountable.
My heart goes out to this family, this child, but I'm also seeing they're all children. They don't know how to manage their anger. They don't know how to manage the hurt that they may be having from their childhoods or in their home. They're looking for scapegoats. That's why bullying happens. So the solution really is remediation, treatment, therapy, all of those mental health services.
Kelowna RCMP say they're working closely with community partners to address the rise in youth violence. They're commending 2 youth who tried to intervene during this assault and called police.
Empowering youth to call 911 when witnessing violence and reaching out to adults to help stop violence is of utmost importance.
The mother of another teen whose daughter was swarmed under similar circumstances said even after the family moved cities in June, the bullying hasn't stopped.
The bullies that my daughter was facing in Kelowna have started up pretty intensely again as of yesterday on Snapchat.
Sadly, no, it's not surprising. We know rates of bullying, especially cyberbullying, are going up.
She says it's crucial parents and teachers talk openly with youth about bullying.
Ask that direct question, especially around stories like this. So, have you heard this story? What does it make you feel? How are you processing it first? Then, have you ever experienced bullying in any form?
She said healing begins with open conversations and collective accountability. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Country music superstar Garth Brooks has been accused of rape and sexual assault. The musician's former hairstylist and makeup artist filed a lawsuit in California today, claiming he raped her during a road trip in 2019. She also says Brooks exposed himself on multiple occasions. According to the complaint, Brooks filed a preemptive lawsuit last month denying the claims and alleging extortion. An Indigenous man in Manitoba finally gets justice. Coming up, how he was declared innocent 5 decades after being wrongly convicted of murder. In Winnipeg, an Indigenous man sent to prison 50 years ago has finally won his case. Clarence Woodhouse always maintained his innocence, and today Manitoba's Chief Justice acquitted him of a decades-old murder and apologized for the many failures that led to the 72-year-old's wrongful conviction. Melissa Ridgen was at Winnipeg's courthouse when it happened.
That's the sigh of an innocent man. This acquittal, signed by the Chief Justice of Manitoba, who apologized for a system that got it wrong, telling 72-year-old Clarence Woodhouse he's innocent in the 1973 beating and stabbing death of Ting Fong Chan, a Winnipeg restaurant worker, and shouldn't have spent 12 years behind bars.
They turned around. Clarence's name has been added to our list. This is the list of innocence cat exonerees.
2 others were acquitted and received an apology from the same judge a year ago.
It's been a long time coming, so I'm glad that it's here already and it's dealt with. So I'd like to, hopefully I can move on from here on.
Well, it's about time somebody believes me. I mean, 50 years is a long time.
A 4th man, Russell Woodhouse, will never know that feeling. He died in 2011, a convicted killer. The Crown said it's now known that in the 1970s, a squad of Winnipeg detectives would assault and manufacture confessions from Indigenous men like them, and prosecutors, judges, and juries were keen to go along. Chan's family supports the acquittals, realizing, though, that whoever did murder their loved one may never be brought to justice. The group Innocence Canada spent years working on this case, and next will petition the federal justice minister to strike a task force to work with Indigenous leaders to identify others likely innocent of murder.
Statistically, we know that with the disproportionate number of indigenous people in jail, that there has to be wrongful convictions.
Woodhouse wants them to find hope in his ordeal.
Everything will be okay.
Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Ahead, digging into the details of an election interference case against former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Bro, lay down. I'm just trying to go home. Lay down. Man, if you don't lay down, I am on the ground. Put your hand on your stomach.
There is a verdict in this case of police brutality in the U.S. 3 former police officers have been found guilty in the death of Tyree Nichols. The 29-year-old died after he was beaten during a traffic stop in Memphis, Tennessee last year. The 3 were found guilty of obstructing justice by witness tampering, but were cleared of the most serious counts of civil rights violations that could have resulted in life in prison. 2 other officers already pleaded guilty. All were fired, and Nichols' death sparked calls for police reform. Mark Rutte is in Ukraine for his first official trip as the new head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and he said this about Ukraine's bid for NATO membership.
Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before and will continue on this path until you become a member of our alliance.
Rutte met Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and pledged more support to help fight Russia's full-scale invasion. Zelensky again called on allies to stop delaying a decision to allow deep strikes into Russia with Western weapons. Rutte also commemorated fallen Ukrainian soldiers at a memorial in Kyiv. In the U.S., new documents are revealing more details around the Department of Justice's case against former President Donald Trump and his alleged role in the January 6th riot on the Capitol. Unsealed files claim Trump was well aware his attempts to subvert the 2020 election were illegal and that it could instigate unrest. As Jackson Prosco reports, the new arguments are also trying to counter the U.S. Supreme Court's controversial rulings around presidential immunity.
He still won't commit to honoring the results of the upcoming vote. It's the last election, which Donald Trump still refuses to concede, that's at the heart of a newly unsealed filing from special counsel Jack Smith.
We won. We won. We did win. It was a rigged election.
The 165-page brief was filed after the Supreme Court ruled Trump is immune from prosecution for official acts. It alleges Trump was acting as a private citizen, not as president, when he undertook the scheme to stay in office, pressuring his then vice president to overturn the will of voters.
If Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
And summoning a mob of supporters to the U.S. Capitol.
I think what Jack Smith has done is made a pretty compelling argument that the charged defenses here have nothing to do with President Trump's official capacity as president.
The most damning claims are that Trump and his aides knew they had lost and knew their plan to stay in power was corrupt. According to the filing, on January 6th, an unnamed aide told Trump that Pence had to be evacuated from the Capitol. Trump is said to have responded, "So what?" In another instance, an unidentified aide was warned of potential unrest at a vote counting center as a result of bogus fraud claims, and allegedly responded, "Make them riot."
They should have never allowed the information to come before the public, but they did that because they want to hurt you with the election.
While Trump claims the release of evidence is politically motivated, it's only emerging this close to the election because he has repeatedly appealed and delayed the legal process. It's not clear when the election subversion trial might actually begin. If Trump loses November's election, it's all but certain he'll appeal this filing to the Supreme Court. And if he wins, he can simply make the entire case disappear. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
One of thousands of unknown Canadian soldiers finally identified decades after he was killed. Next, the story of Corporal William Cunningham. The cemeteries in Europe from the First World War are filled with thousands of unknown soldiers, men who fought and died and were never identified. Among them are countless young Canadians. And now, more than 100 years later, one of them has been identified. His name is Corporal William Cunningham. Mike Armstrong explains how the mystery was solved and what it means for the soldier's family.
The daily ceremony at Menin Gate in Ypres, Belgium, remembers not only fallen soldiers, but specifically those who were killed and couldn't be identified. The Tyne Cot Cemetery outside town is the largest of all Commonwealth war cemeteries. It's the final resting place of nearly 12,000 soldiers. About 2/3 of them don't have names. Officially, there are about 1,000 Canadians, but that number is likely considerably higher. Well, there is now one more being given back his name. Corporal William Benjamin Cunningham. He was killed October 27th of 1917. The linking of an unidentified soldier with one of the missing was actually made by a student working with the Department of National Defense.
He definitely had this oh my goodness moment and was able to reach out to me and said, I think I found the missing piece in this puzzle.
Corporal Cunningham grew up in Brandon, Manitoba before enlisting. He was just 21 years old when he was killed. The letter notifying his family said he was shot by a sniper. His mother had just days earlier sent him a package for Christmas. Cunningham's oldest descendant says he's often thought about the great uncle who never made it home.
His desire to get over and help and fight for freedom, I guess, is just astonishing to me. At such a young age, he'd be willing to sign up and go.
War at its absolute worst.
Military historian David O'Keefe says the campaign where Cunningham was killed was one of the most brutal. Soldiers were buried on the battlefield basically as quickly as possible. They were moved to Tyne Cot Cemetery in most cases years later. Giving them back their names even more than a century later is remembering them, and deserved. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is near Shoal Lake, Manitoba. Thanks for watching. Neetu Garcha will be here at the Anchor Desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.